We will start right now the webinar. Today we will carry out the first webinar for the Eco Challenge regarding water. Let me just talk to you about the Eco Challenge. We will focus on two main subjects. The first one is create a way to conserve and reuse water at the industry level, and also to access to safe water. In this occasion, Eric Holshiner, a water expert and manager, will conduct this session. Eric Holshiner is a Mexican citizen graduated from Tec Monterrey University. Over the past 7 years, Eric has worked with PepsiCo, and he's now the Environmental Sustainability Manager. In doing so, Eric is leading a project on water recovery in Mexico where the PepsiCo and the Nature Conservancy seek a positive balance in the water-stressed regions. Eric has already undertaken various important projects in water and energy recovery, such as ceilings that collect rainwater in PepsiCo plant. In this process, rainwater is collected through the ceilings and transported to re-inject it into the ground. Also, Eric works in the Cancun PepsiCo plant to decrease the water consumption and recycle rainwaters in the same process. Now Eric will carry on with a webinar session followed by a Q&A session. We're gonna have a special space for you to ask questions to Eric, and he will answer all your inquiries. So with that, I leave you, Eric, to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So we're going to be talking about water. And so what is it with the water? The world we have, even though the world is filled with water, most of the water, 97% of it, it's salt water. And the rest of it, only 2.5%, it's actually fresh water that we can use as for our needs. This water, it's distributed across lakes, aquifers, rivers, swamps, glaciers, and the permanent snow. Most of this fresh water is located on the glaciers and the permanent snow. It's around 68.9%. 30% is in aquifer and swamps, and only the 0.3% of the water that we can see, it's the one that is on the lakes and the rivers. So we have a very small amount of water available to perform everything that we want to do. I'm going to be talking about some concepts, and this is important for you to understand how the water process is going to be happening and how the nature transports the water that we have, we can use in our cities, in our houses, in our facilities. And so there are three basic concepts. One is the watershed, the other one is aquifer and recharge. So let me try to explain on detail. The watershed is what you can see on the mountains. It's an area of land that catches the rain, the snow, and it forms rivers, and it lets the water go into a certain specific area. So we might have different watersheds in a bigger area. It depends on the water, where it's going to, how it's going to be flowing, and eventually it's going to end in a lake or a river. So it's basically where the whole system that is retaining the water, that it's called a watershed. The aquifer, it's water being stored under the ground. This is a very important amount of water because it's almost the 60% of the water that we have availability. Most of the cities and most of the places dig holes in order to be able to take the water out of them. We have seen them in movies and in cartoons, how the wells are being performed on the ground, and in this way we can take water out of the ground. So this is a very important way of restoring water. And most of the cities across Latin America have wells in which they can take water out of the ground and use it for the needs of the human being. Where does your water come from? And this is a very important question, and I would like to try you to think. If I make this question, I have done it at several times at the office, sometimes with relatives or with friends, and most of the people say it comes from the tap. So it does not. It really comes. It's a little more complicated than that. In the process, if we want to make sure, if we want to impact what is going on, we need to make sure of where is it coming from. For example, if we're going online and we look at Google Maps and we see where Mexico is located and we open the view, we can see that Mexico is located at the same height as the Sahara Desert. So in theory, Mexico could be a whole big desert, but it's not. What is happening in Mexico is that the hurricanes are taking a lot of water into the system, and they are supporting the water process in which Mexico receives its water. So the hurricanes bring water to Mexico, and it's going to be the same thing in Central America. Most of the water that the countries receive comes from hurricanes. A big amount of water is being displaced and placed in the country and in the processes that will lead this water into the aquifers, into the wells that we can use, into the rivers, lakes, etc. What is happening in other places? In Latin America, for example, in Colombia, the water is coming basically from the Cuenca del Magdaleno. It's close to the Cauca area. In Venezuela and Colombia, also the Cuenca del Orinoco, it's very important. It's a very important system which is bringing water to that area. Brazil and Peru and Bolivia, Colombia, Ecuador, Venezuela, they all receive water from the Cuenca of the Amazonas. The Amazonas is a very, very important river for the world, and it's bringing a big amount of water to those people that is on those areas. And Argentina, Uruguay, they receive water from the Aquifer of the Guarani. So also another part of Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, Brazil, also the Cuenca del Plata. Chile receives a very important from the field, the north ice fields, and the south region receives water from the south ice as well. So whenever you try to imagine where is it coming from, where is it, that water that we are taking out of the sink, of the tap, how did it get to the city? How did it get to that place where it's being pumped to our houses? It mostly is from a river. It's mostly from a mountain that is receiving the water that is falling in rain. So this is very important to be able to understand where is it coming from and where is it going. On this process, and this is very important to try to understand, this is the water cycle. So what it basically is happening, it basically starts on the oceans. On the oceans, the water is being evaporated into the clouds. Then it's moving into the countries, into the mountains, and then it's raining. Some of the water is stored in ice and snow. Some of the one it's being it runs through the rivers. A very important part of it, it's filtrating into the underground, into the aquifers. And something that is very, very important is that we have been destroying this process basically by cutting out the forests. The forests are the ones that retain the water and letting it go into the filtration and letting it go into the processes that we require to extract it. An important situation that is happening across the globe is that we have been destroying these forests and the water is not being held in the process that it used to, and it's going too fast into the ocean, and we cannot use it from there. So the climate change, it's an important topic, but water, it's also very important. We have to make sure of how we can stop this and how we can recover these processes in which the nature gave us the water that we depend so hardly on. What is happening in Latin America? So if we look at the scarcity of the water, there are places that are in a very important situation. Most of the north of Mexico, it's in a water scarcity, over a 200% overuse. Mexico City is an important place where the water it's going to be a very important topic for the future generations. And going a little to the south, a part of Ecuador and a part of Chile are being are having a water scarcity. But this is about how much water they can use and how much water they have availability. And another important thing is to be aware of how much water we are using. And this is an important thing because it's not only how much water we have availability, but how much water we are using. So it's a correlation between how much we are using and how much we have. Our footprint across Latin America, we can look at, and we can see this on this chart. The biggest users are the United States and Alaska, and also in South America we have a big part of risk in the middle of it. Brazil also is using too much water, so this is important to understand how much water we are using. And even though some places seem to have an important amount of it, it's whenever you think about the scale of how many people is living across those areas, the amount of water available is not as much as it used to be. I remember an example of Sao Paulo. In Brazil, Sao Paulo seems to have a lot of water because it's located in a very big area with lakes. But they start suffering from water scarcity in an important way. And I remember very hard that I have seen people washing their streets with a hose, and this tells you that they are not used to having water scarcity, and they tend to use too much of it. So it's very important that we start thinking about how much we are using, and it's no longer that how much I'm using. It's no longer what I am doing. It's about how much we can add to the things that we're doing. We're living in exponential times. Everything that we do is multiplied by the other things that people do. On the water footprint, how are we using this water? How is the humankind using the water? 72% of the water, I'm sorry, it's being used for agricultural processes. We're using 72% of the water that we use as humankind to grow our food. This is our biggest, more important use. If we want to improve how much water we are using as humankind, we need to improve the processes that we're using in agricultural side. Only the 3% of the water is being used for industrial products, 4% it's being used for domestic consumption, and there's another part of water that is called the external water footprint, which takes us again to the 20% of the agricultural process and 2% for industrial products. There's another thing. It's not just about how much water we have available and where is it available. but how much about the water quality that we have availability to. It is said that in Latin America, 77 million people do not have access to potable water. Over 100 million do not have sanitary services, and less than 14% of the water sewage is treated. So we're sending a big amount of water into the ocean that it's not being cleared. Another situation that is happening across Latin America, poor people is paying between 1.5 and 2.8 times more of the cost of the water that people it's paying for. Estoy escuchando mucho ruido. Hola. Chicos, pónganle mute por favor. Okay. So, if we think about the water, it's not only about the availability, it's also about the water quality. It's very important to make sure that people will receive the water that they need and in the quality that they need it. So you're going to be having an important challenge, and it's how to maintain the access to fresh water and how to reuse and conserve rainwater. If we take into advantage the water from the rain, it's so important in the water cycles. The challenge that you're facing now in this eco challenge, it's very important and it has great opportunities into having a good impact on what is going on the planet. So I thank you for being here. We are going to be opening the microphone for questions if there are any. So thank you, and please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Eric, and we will now open the Q&A session. The Q&A session is now open. I don't know if you can see the questions, so if when we get the questions, I will read them to you. Also, because this will be uploaded afterwards to the YBT Bootcamp, and so we need to hear the questions first. While we get those questions, I actually have one of my own. You spoke a little bit about the water process being affected by people destroying the forest, right? So what can we do to educate or inform people about this, and what actions are being taken right now, or what can be done regarding this subject?
Okay, it's important to make sure that the water does not go straight to the oceans and straight to the sewer. Educating people, it's one of the I think it's one of the biggest, one of the first steps that we have to follow, and explain what is happening, what is important. A big challenge that we're facing is that we only not, specifically in Latin America, poverty, it's a big problem. People will do whatever they have to do in order to feed their families, and if this represents cutting down trees and sell the wood, they're going to do it. So we need to find ways in which people can have a income not destroying the forest. Some projects that I have analyzed are regarding planting a specific kind of trees that will give a resin that can be used in industrial processes, and it can be sold. So people will protect the forest in order to be able to sell this resin from the trees, because that is what it represents their income. It's an important balance that we have to achieve, and it's a part of responsibility by the government, an important part of what we're doing as a society. Our companies are part of this equation, so everybody has a part of it, and so I'm pretty sure that we all can contribute into fixing this kind of situation.
Great, great. We have here right now the first question. This comes from Isabella, and she says, "Hi, I would like to know if Eric can tell us an example of the best practice for freshwater access carried out by PepsiCo."
Sure. We are like freshwater. Okay, first of all, we're working on a project in which we're aiming to restore water from the aquifers in which we are taking water out of. We began some pilots in Mexico and Guadalajara, and also there's another pilot going on in Cancun, in which we are collecting water from rainwater, and we're conducting it to a system that is returning it to the underground. It's a little complicated because we cannot connect the whole roof and the whole area of the plant. We need to neglect the water from the patios where the trucks are moving because of the oil that it can contaminate the underwater. So we could only do it from the roof side, and we are conducting water into the systems and the plants. We are also working on another project in which we're aiming to restore water from the aquifers in which we're taking water out. And so we're working right now in the north of Mexico, Monterrey, with the TNC. And we're going to be working in a waterfront to be restoring some part of the water that is being taken out on the aquifer of Monterrey.
Perfect. We have right now another question. It's a very interesting one. It says, how can water footprint in Bolivia be as high as water footprint in the U.S.?
I don't know. We should take a look at that data. I don't have the specific knowledge of what is going on in Bolivia, but I would have to take a deeper look at the data. I don't know the answer.
Okay, yeah, that's a very interesting question, a very tough one as well.
Yes, it is.
We're gonna go to the next one. It says, what is the most important challenge in the issues of water in the modern day, and the contemporary problems we have right now?
The water situation, what we have learned in PepsiCo is that the water situation, it's not a worldwide problem. It depends on where you are. Some countries have a big amount of water, and I'm thinking of places like Finland and places like Sweden. Their population is low, they have a big amount of lakes, and they're very careful about the environment. And what happens in other places, in India, it's one of the places where the challenge is enormous. India has a very, very large amount of people. It's the second biggest country in population in the world. And the water sources are contaminated. So it's very complex balance between the amount of people, the knowledge and the responsibility about how they're using the water and the availability of it. I believe the biggest challenge is to be able to reach the balance in which we can restore the water that we're using and not use more than it's going to be available. That's a hard thing. It's a complicated situation, but if we want to survive as a society, we need to reach it. Otherwise, it's predicted that wars in the future are going to be held to try to control the water sources.
And actually, that's a great segue for the next question. The next question, it says, another issue related to water is the dispute among states regarding the ownership of rivers and underground waters, especially in the Middle East. She asks, can you tell us a little bit more of how it affects people, this dispute?
Of course, the disputes between governments tend to have bad endings, and in the processes, the ones that usually lose are the people that it's involved in it. There was a case in Mexico in which an area of poor people had a lot of water, and it was taken from them to keep the water to the rich ones. So it's not also about the governments and the places, but it's also about who has the money to pay for the thing. So unfortunately, the poorest people is the ones that usually receive the hardest situation and the worst scenarios.
Okay, let's move on to the next one. The next question is, what kind of projects are the most successful in the real life?
The ones that are an integral solution. And I'm going to back to the example of the forest. If we want to protect forests, we need the people that live close to them or are at least interacted with them to find a solution in which they will protect the forest because they find a good income about that. If we go and plant a million trees and people are starving, they're going to be cutting them down and they're going to sell the wood. So that's not going to help anybody. If we find a way in which the trees and the forest will give the people a way of sustaining their lives, a way of having an income, they are going to be protecting the woods. They're going to be protecting the forest. So that's the hardest part, to find a process in which you can improve the water availability, but it's going to be sustained across time. And it's going to be sustained by the people that it's going to be related to it and it's going to be involved in it. So any solution needs to be an integral solution, considering not only the factor of the water balance, but also the society and the economical factors that have been affecting this process.
Great. Let's move on to the next one. It's a little bit of a specific question. He's asking, which country in America has the highest water-related issues?
I think it would be Mexico, and specifically it would be Mexico City. The aquifer of Mexico City is being overexploited in 500%. The amount of people living over there, and depending on that aquifer, it's over 22 million people in the metropolitan area. And that is one of the biggest issues that we are facing in Latin America, an important risk. The amount of people living there is huge, and the amount of water available is low, and the place is being the water is being contaminated, and that is a very big thing.
That sounds like a very difficult issue. We'll move to the next one. This concerns the Eco Challenge. The question says, if I have a project that does not necessarily tackle access to rainwater, but will guarantee the conservation of forests, could it be considered a project for the Water Challenge within the Eco Challenge?
Yes, I think it can be. Please prepare the information and submit it. I'm pretty sure it can be considered into the process.
Great, great. We also have another question. It says, what do you think about desalination of water as a business of the future?
The thing is that you require energy. When you desalinate water, it's going to be close to the ocean. And how are you going to take it back to the middle of a country? So desalinization, it's very expensive. It requires a lot of energy, and it's going to be done close to the ocean. So I see that it's going to be a business for rich people, but not for everybody.
Okay, okay. And we have another question regarding fresh water. They ask if fresh water is the same as potable water.
No, fresh water, it's regarding on the environment and the difference between having salt water in the oceans and fresh water in the rivers. Potable water is the one that is being used on your house. Ideally, it would be clean. Sometimes it's not.
Okay, perfect. I think that we will be ending the Q&A session for now. If you want to add something else, Eric, this will be the time.
No, thank you for being here.
Okay, perfect. We appreciate it, and it's been a really good session. I hope you will join us in the future for other webinars, and well, we also have the same webinar tomorrow in Spanish. I also want to remind everyone that the webinar will be uploaded to the YIBT Bootcamp, so people that weren't able to see it live can watch it afterwards. So Eric, once again, thank you very much, and we hope to hear from you soon.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.